So, just like everything else, do African American reforms work overnight? No. Are they currently working? No. If everything had worked out, we wouldn't need things like the Black Lives Matter movement. But as long as there are people that are willing to stand up and say this is not okay, these people, those people, whatever, if you stop looking at everybody as these people or those people and collectivize it as a we, you start to hopefully realize that there's no difference between each other. So the NAACP still exists today for a reason. If they didn't need to exist, they wouldn't be here. And we will revisit this trend as we get into World War I and the Great Migration and World War II. And all over and over again, we're going to revisit this trend. But for now, we're going to leave the progressive reforms where they are. If you want an interesting story, Heart and Soul, this is a really good one. Or again, I feel like I've talked about this book before, maybe not. Black AF History. Fantastic book. It's really, really worth reading. And we are going to leave our African American reforms where they are, on that note of hope of the NAACP and what they are going to come to later on. And we are going to turn to the temperance movement of the progressive era. And if you're unfamiliar with temperance, it basically just means you're not drinking. You are not drinking alcohol. And the women's Christian temperance movement begins this crusade against alcohol during the progressive era in conjunction with the Anti-Saloon League. And a lot of kids ask me what a saloon is. It's a fancy word for bar. Okay, I'm sure there's some differences in there, but for APUSH purposes, saloon is just a fancy word for bar. So the WCTM, the Women's Christians Temperance Movement, what they do is link progressivism with morality and Christian reform initiatives. And to be moral and Christian, you don't want to drink because alcohol is a vice. Right? It's bad for you. And it's a practical concern because working men spend their money on alcohol and liquor, and they go to saloons and they turn violent. And if we can get rid of alcohol, we will solve all of the problems of the world. It is important to note that we do not admit that women drink, okay? We are focused on the drinking men. Now, women do drink, but we don't focus on that because that would imply that women are not moral and pure, and we don't want to do that. So when we look at temperance, we are looking at the effect it has on men and how men treat their women and their families when they're drinking. And so the WCTU and the Anti-Saloon League want to eliminate the sale of alcohol. And they start at local bars, and then they'll move on to cities, and then they'll move on to the states to get the votes to eliminate the sale of alcohol. And you may be thinking that's crazy. You can't eliminate the sale of something that so many people drink, but you'd be surprised. So in 1906, the Anti-Saloon League has succeeded in getting 40% of the nation's counties to go dry, which means that 40% of the counties in America, which are the places where people live within the states, 40% of them are alcohol free. That's what it means to go dry. You don't have alcohol. You can't buy it, sell it in that state. 12 full states have done the same by 1909. And so this goes from just this idea to becoming a full political effort. And they are going to, the WCTU and the Anti-Saloon League are going to push for government elimination of alcohol. And they want to completely prohibit the sale, manufacture, and transportation of alcohol nationwide. And again, they're leaning on this idea that alcohol is ruining the country. Men are too violent. Men are drunks. Men are spending all of their money. They're treating their wives bad. They're treating their children bad. They're beating their wives. They're beating their children. And it's because they're drunks. And if we can just get rid of alcohol, then men will behave better and everybody will be happy. And so, amazingly, they are able to pass the 18th Amendment, which prohibits the sale, manufacture, and transportation of alcohol, which does not eliminate it. It just leads to people doing it undercover. So people will drink in their own houses, and that's fine as long as you don't tell anybody about it. And people will open what are called speakeasies, which are secret underground bars, and you'll have to know the password to get in. And if anybody comes and raids the speakeasy, everybody's got to go and the alcohol disappears. But most of the police officers know where the speakeasies are because they're members, so you're not really worried about that. This also is going to lead the mafia to be able to really work in their life of crime, because you can make a killing transporting bootlegged alcohol across state lines. And for those of you who are willing enough, you can make a fortune bootlegging alcohol, and you can make a fortune making your own alcohol and selling it to people, because everybody wants it and you have to do it in secret now. If the 18th Amendment does not stop anybody from drinking, it just stops them from doing it legally. And that'll stay in place for a little bit. We'll come back to that later, but obviously, if you know anything about America, you should know that that amendment no longer exists, because you can buy alcohol. So something had to have happened to surpass that.